Hey guys, Charai5 here, and today we are continuing Doll Week with, finally, an entry that has nothing to do with the Child's Play series. We are now tackling the Saw series, another, actual series instead of, you know, a lot of the other movies that were just, you know, maybe a franchise. I guess the difference between the two is really depending on what you consider, but, you know, a franchise, I guess, is more of a bigger thing. So let's call it the Saw franchise and the Child's Play franchise as opposed to the series. But yeah, there were 7 Saw movies with an 8th one coming out tomorrow, apparently. I've seen some of the trailers say that it comes out on the 27th, so on Friday. But other trailers I've seen more recently say that it comes out tomorrow, and I've seen some of the time slots for it in nearby theaters. And yeah, there are some presentations tomorrow, but the internet also states that it comes out on the 27th, so I have no idea. I guess tomorrow is the premiere, but it officially comes out on Friday. I don't know anymore. But the fact of the matter is, there are a shit ton of Saw movies, just like Child's Play. In fact, I think they're about the same amount of movies, ironically. However, Saw did them in a way shorter time span than Child's Play. And we're moving on with Jigsaw, or Billy the Doll, depending on what you choose to name him. I personally, I know that the doll's name is Billy, I know that, but I like calling him Jigsaw anyway, because there's another character on this list that's also named Billy, and it's kind of hard to make the distinction between the two, so I'd rather call him Jigsaw. John Kramer, I believe, is the name of the real person, played by Tobin Bell, who is fantastic in these films, I gotta say. And as for how I came to know the Saw movies and I actually do have sort of a history. I was watching those films probably around the age I should not have been. Then again, I can say that for a lot of films in my life. But it was during the time my dad was actually going to college to become a teacher. He was going to his university, and he made a lot of friends at university. And one of those friends recommended the Saw series to my dad, specifically the first 2 movies. I think more movies in the series had been out by then, I'm not sure. But this friend of my dad's had Saw 1 and Saw 2 on DVD. And my dad's always been, I think that's probably where my sister and I get it from. My dad's always been a lover of horror. And it's really weird, too, because I know that he loves horror, but I find it weird when I start watching him watch horror stuff. I know that he enjoys it very much. And it was something that didn't really dawn on me until I was older, but it did explain like a lot of stuff in terms of what he liked listening to or playing when it came to video games and such. And he borrowed those DVDs and took them home, and they were just laying there, and my dad actually sat down and watched them, and he hated them. He actually really does not like the Saw movies, because to him, they're not scary. Like, and I agree, they're not scary films at all. It's funny that for a month called, I guess I didn't call it Scary Month, fortunately, but you know, I feel like I've been saying that a lot for most of these films that I've been covering, or for most of the mediums that I've been covering. They're not scary, and I think that's probably what I enjoy so much about them. It's like when it comes to Child's Play and Saw, they share one thing in common: they don't scare me, but they entertain me, and it's because they have stories to tell. Saw more so than Child's Play, though, because I feel like Child's Play is just, you know, it's more slasher fun, and you're following a specific character, whereas with Saw, you're following a story, you know, and I feel like they didn't really know. I don't really know if what I'm about to say is true, but I don't think they knew what they wanted to do with the series when they made the first 2 films. because from Saw 3 onward, it really, you can start to tell that there is a more elaborate story there. And that's to me where it started getting good. I know a lot of people see Saw 1 and Saw 2 as like, oh, those were the best, and then everything that came afterward is just like, oh, it's Hollywood cheese, and it's, oh my God, whatever, it's so stupid. It's like, my thing about that is, Saw 1 and Saw 2 are memorable, sure, but they're so disconnected, I think, from, well, I mean, this is just me personally, I haven't seen them in a while, it's so disconnected from the rest of the story that it's hard to go back and watch them. It was like a few months ago, I actually watched Saw 7 with my sister, because I think that was the only movie that we didn't see together. And I don't know, even watching it again, I was like, I enjoy this. I like these films. My dad didn't like them, right? And so I figured, you know what? I'll see them, and I'll see why he didn't like them, or what about them like wasn't scary. I'll be the judge of that, sort of. So I watched them, and I was intrigued. I liked where the movies were going, and I liked that it was sort of more of a mystery than it was actual horror. And the story of John Kramer is, I feel like I've been throwing around the word interesting a lot throughout Creepy Month, but I really can't find another descriptor. I just love the story behind him. It's this man who suffers a car crash and is clinging on to dear life, and because of that, he starts appreciating life a whole lot more, and he wants other people to do so as well, to stop wasting their lives and start living them. And I know that a lot of people have their opinions towards the Saw character. I personally like playing devil's advocate a lot with him, because in his, at his essence, or at least in his mind, he's not doing a bad thing. Because I feel like a lot of movie monsters or horror villains know that what they're doing is wrong, and they just have a total disregard for it. Whereas I think Jigsaw is more, he knows that what he's doing is horrible, but at the same time, he doesn't do it for the sake of being horrible. It's more so to teach people a lesson. It's like, how much do you value your life? And I do have to agree that at least, and this was something I even thought of when I first saw, I think it was Saw 5 where they explained that, I don't remember. They all just blend together eventually into one big story, which is something I kind of like. They're all very memorable movies, and they all have their memorable moments. I unfortunately have a hard time remembering what moments are from what movies. But one thing I do agree with is that when he had a car crash, he wasn't on a timer. He could have gotten out of that car, in whatever time he wanted. He always leaves a timer on his victims, and that's where it's like, okay, you're kind of being unfair here. You're trying to teach them a lesson, and they would succeed and value their lives, if they were able to get out of there either way. Like, I don't think they need a timer for that. But either way, I still do think that Jigsaw is a very interesting villain, and I don't even like considering him a villain because of, what he's trying to teach people. Value your life. How much do you value it? Would you value it to the point of, at someone else's expense? Like, okay, now that I say it out loud, that does sound really evil, but there are instances where it's not. There are instances where it is just genuinely like, okay, I've put this obstacle in your way. You have to figure it out for yourself. Use your brains. The instances where he is playing with other people's lives, that is kind of a dickish thing, I will admit. But I don't know. It never struck me as, oh, this dude is evil. Because I think it was more so because I looked more at his intentions than I did at his actions. And yeah, now that I'm looking at his actions, I do sort of see why yeah. Where the new movie's coming, the new movie's called Jigsaw. Every other movie up until this point had been called Saw because of what he has to do in the, because what the main characters have to do in the first film, and then it just kind of didn't make sense why the series was called Saw at all. So Jigsaw, I do think, is a very more appropriate name. What it's about, what happens in it, I have no idea. All I know is that there is a mystery because the character does eventually die, and his legacy is carried on by his apprentices, which is also something else that is really, really intricate and really cool in the story, I think. It's not just him who shares this ideology, but even some of his victims see what he's trying to do and agree with him, and as a result start following him. Like, that's such an interesting thought to me. It's like, how do you not hold resentment for this person? That means that he, in a way, did what he did, and, it worked. He managed to change these people's minds into doing something more with their lives, even if it meant helping them. And another really curious thing to me is that most of, if not all of his victims, for, again, lack of a better word, or subjects, I guess, are related to him in some way. Like, the dude from the first movie was his doctor, and the other dude from the first movie was, like, he knew the doctor, something like that. But, like, they're all interconnected with Jigsaw in some way. And to me, like, that just makes the narrative just so much more interesting. I think my only real gripe with the film series is that instead of horror, this is the final piece, by the way, I could go on and on about what I think about the series, just like the Child's Play series. Unfortunately, there is only one doll sort of staple character, so I didn't get to talk about this series as much as I'd like to. But I guess the one thing that I can say about the series is that despite it not being horror, it is, I guess, considered gore. There is a lot of, it's torture porn. I was talking about it with my buddy Eugene earlier, and he used the term torture porn, and I'm like, yeah, that's pretty much exactly what this is. And I mean, that doesn't take away from the entertainment of it. You're still watching, I think, in awe half the time. And as the series progresses, it just gets, in my opinion, more and more interesting just to watch the story unfold, because there does end up being an actual antagonist that isn't actually Jigsaw. And it's funny to see how, like, I could go on and on about the spoilers and, just how many moments I think are cool. But I think the main theme and the main thing that I think is so interesting and amazing to me is how he and his apprentices anticipate the human thought. Like, they know from the beginning, this is the individual, this is the subject, this is their trap, this is what I think they're going to do. So they already know from the get-go, it's like, okay, one of two things is going to happen because the human mind is just so predictable. Either you're going to succeed or you're going to fail, and I know exactly how you're going to fail if you do. And I also know how you're going to succeed if you do. Like, to me, that's so interesting. And it comes into play in one of the best endings in any of the films. But if you haven't watched the films and if you're not very squeamish, I do suggest you watch these movies because aside from the gore, there is a story behind it that I personally think is very interesting. You might not find it as such, but there's more to it than just, blood and guts. There's way more to it. It has a lot of very interesting characters, and they all connect, and they're all very human. So yeah, go watch Jigsaw, again, if you're not squeamish, in theaters tomorrow or starting Friday, depending on your local theater. As for the piece, I absolutely love the way it came out, and I was surprised to do it in, like, under 2 hours. It's probably one of my favorite pieces and very appropriate for, again, one of my favorite horror, quote-unquote, franchises. But we will be picking this up tomorrow. I've left you with this image long enough. And thank you so much for watching. Stay safe and stay awesome. This is Jar5, signing off.